And I was really moved, listening to Ken's talk here, because, as he was saying, in the Jewish religion, the Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of the world, the birthday of creation that we're celebrating. And I feel that a lot of the songs and music that has come through me is part of that celebration. And it's also interesting because Ken and I talked briefly, but we didn't talk about these things. But he talked a little bit about Krishna in the Hindu tradition. I'm going to talk a little bit about that story today, in my relationship with that. So, I I was born into a Jewish family, but I wasn't very religious. I had a bar mitzvah, but after that, I really went away from my Judaism because the synagogue that I was associated with, it just didn't seem like a very friendly place. There wasn't a lot of attention really to the kids and helping them really explain what was going on. And so I'd actually had like this contempt for Judaism. And I really had a contempt for all religion and spirituality. So I wasn't one of these people, you sometimes read about where they had these charming experiences from early on in life of communing with the divine. I never had anything like that through college. And then after college, I had just come out of a very painful relationship and was in a depression. And the same thing at that time, really had no interest in religion or spirituality at all. And I had come to Philadelphia because there was a social action movement here. I don't know if any of you had heard of it, called Movement for a New Society, where they were trying to do social change. And I was feeling very down, and I just thought, maybe this is what I should do, is get involved in social action. That's going to be of my interest. But I went there for the weekend, and I just kind of felt, this was not for me. But speaking to some of the very kind people there, before I left, one man said to me, he just said, there's this woman in New York who's a wonderful counselor. Her name was Janet Funder, and you should contact her. I think you'd have a nice connection with her. So I thanked him, and I went back to New York where I was living at the time, and I contacted Janet. And like almost exactly at the same time, within a week or two, I was walking by this yoga center on 14th Street and 6th Avenue in New York, where they had this glowing neon light that was saying yoga. And for some reason, I was just attracted to that. And I went to see Janet Funder, and she said to me, for this one, she said, I never do this with clients, but, for some reason, I moved to tell you this. And she said, my spiritual teacher is here, who is a Sufi teacher. And, he's here this weekend, and maybe you'd like to go and just see him. I think that you would have some kind of connection with this. And like I said, I was in this distraught, kind of depressed place, so I was open to all kinds of things that I wouldn't have been open to before. And I went that weekend, and the teacher, Adnan Sarham, was there. He just passed away about a year ago or so. But we were doing, spiritual work, which was all a lot of fun. It was dancing and drumming and whirling and slow movement. And so it didn't seem anything, that was too churchy for me or too religious for me or whatever. But out of nowhere, through doing slow movement and dance, you began to enter into these expanded states of consciousness and go into deep meditation, which I never realized we had the capacity for this. I never realized spirituality was about that, and I was kind of like in shock, just from having fun and doing these movements. And so it was very, very powerful for me. And that same week, after seeing Adnan, I decided, I'm going to go up and see what this yoga studio is with neon lights that are flashing. And I went up there and I met this very lovely being who's still teaching yoga in New York. His name's Dharma Mitra. He's 85 now. And he's a very luminous being, very, very sweet, kind, loving, childlike man in a good way. And so I started doing yoga. And from that period on, I began to enter these expanded states of consciousness. But still, they would be there in a session or they'd be there in a meditation. But then, when I would go home, I could go into these negative states, these states of suffering. I was depressed from a number of other relationships that I'd gone in and out of there, and it's just like, is there any way that we could get over this suffering, you know? And in 2000, in the early 2000s, I started. I studied a number of different. Actually, through those years from the mid '80s, I studied a lot of different spiritual practices and with communities from Hinduism to Buddhism to I was in the Diamond Heart work. I don't know if any of you know that work, with A.H. Almas out in California. And again, I just had the beauty of being able to enter these expanded states, but then I'd go home and, I'd be maybe okay for a couple of days or a couple of weeks, or if I was lucky, a couple of months. But then this negativity, this deep sadness, this wound would reappear. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, I began to sit with some non-dual teachers, through there's a teacher named Papaji. I don't know if any of you have heard of, who a lot of teachers came from the non-dual tradition. And in 1996, I went to India, and on this trip, it was my first time, so I was very excited. And there was a woman on the plane with me, sitting next to me, an American woman, who we started talking. She said, when we land in India, I'm going to a very special event. It's at my guru's ashram. There's going to be a celebration there. And if you'd like to come, you're welcome to come with me. So I was very excited because, I'm going to be getting off the plane and immediately I'm going to be doing something spiritual, But I had no idea what we were doing and where we were going. And we got off the plane, and India is very chaotic for anyone. I don't know if any of you have been there, but for those who have been there, it's very, very chaotic, and much, 100 times more chaotic than now. And even now, it's very chaotic when you get off the plane. And so we hopped in a taxi cab, and I was so excited. It was like at midnight, and we drove to her guru's ashram. And what she said was that tonight the holiday is Krishna Janmashtami, which is Krishna's birthday, which, like Rosh Hashanah, is usually in late August or sometime in September. And I thought, this is interesting. Even though I'd done a lot of yoga and I sang in kirtan and things, I really wasn't interested in the deities so much. I thought they were silly, like, Hanuman is like a monkey who looks like a person, or, Ganesh is an elephant head on a person's body. These things just seem silly to me, just like, in the Abrahamic traditions, especially in, Judaism and in Christianity, just these beliefs in different deities and saints and things like that. They just seemed like they were so extreme that I didn't have any kind of connection to them. But I was excited to go to that ashram that night. And so we went to the ashram, and she said, so this is Krishna's birthday, and as you can see out there, there's a little baby Krishna in a cradle, which was like a little doll of Krishna on a little swing that was outside. And I thought, oh, this is kind of cute. It's sort of like, a baby Jesus in someone's Christmas display or something like that. And she said, and what you do to receive the blessing is you go up and you rock the baby Krishna in the cradle, and that'll give you the blessing, and that's all that you have to do. And so I watched children go up to the little baby and rock them in the cradle, and I thought, oh, it's teaching them to love. The children are supposed to go up and be nice to the baby and teach love. And I can relate to that, so I'm going to go up there and just, rock the baby Krishna and just and transmit or open my heart to love of that. And so I went up and I did that. And I thought, okay, I'm done, and now I'm going to go on to these more important things that I was doing in India. And so I spent a few more weeks in India, and went and visited the tombs of these saints, and went and sat with Papaji, who was like a well-known spiritual teacher who had, was one of Ramana Maharshi's students, one of the great saints of India. And it was a great trip. But then, when I went home, I might have thought about that little event with the baby Krishna for, I might have told the story for a week or two, but it really didn't seem like an important event to me compared to all the other, interesting things that I did, all the saints' tombs and meeting Papaji and all of these other, meeting these gurus and stuff like that. So I went home. This was in '96. And after those couple of weeks, never really thought about that, episode with the baby Krishna. Truly, it just didn't seem important to me until, so 5 years later, my life went on, and I still, was had these periods of bliss and things when I'd be in retreat, but then go back into suffering. But in 2001, I was at a Diamond Heart retreat, like I was saying, who with the leader was A.H. Alamas, but in our group it was a woman named Alia. And it was the last night of a retreat that was up in the Poconos. And the last night was a celebration. It was a dance. And so they played all kinds of music, everything from like, classical music to Nine Inch Nails and The Clash to, South American music to spiritual songs like some, of Jai Uttal and Krishna Das and Deva Premal and things like that. And at the end of the night, they happened to play this Krishna song from Krishna Das, which is called the Mahamudra Meltdown, which is a Hare Krishna song. And everybody was dancing, and I was dancing, and it was very exhilarating, but didn't notice anything special at the moment. And then I went back to my bed that night. And that night was the eve into my birthday, okay? And so in the middle of the night, I went to bed knowing the next day was my birthday. I'm sorry, that night. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up and I had this implosion of my consciousness that took me back 5 years before to when I was standing in front of that baby Krishna. And I was there with the baby Krishna and saw the baby Krishna. And I realized that looking at the baby Krishna, I realized that I was the baby Krishna. And that love that I was transmitting to the baby Krishna was my own love for myself. And that I was the baby Krishna, and I was that love, and that I was free. And in that moment, in the middle of the night, I had this beautiful transmission come to me of just this bliss and love, and this blueness that's actually in the room here right now. And I felt this love of the divine Krishna. And so it was an amazing thing. But I was still a believer in non-duality, that anything that the mind creates is not real. So I was having these episodes of bliss, and I would go into deep meditation, and people around me sometimes would go into deep meditation. But I thought because I was having these visions and things that, this wasn't the real truth. And so I should push it away. I should push away the bliss. I should push away the grace, because anything that's not present in dreamless sleep is not real. That's something that Ramana Maharshi said. Anything not present in dreamless sleep is not real. Well, what is present in dreamless sleep is nothing. It's the extinction of the self. There's no one there. So I had this gift of this Krishna archetype of this baby doll, that moment that I had a connection with it had this tremendous power with me, but I pushed it away. And in 2003, I was blessed with resting, this opportunity of resting in non-duality, but that's a story for another time. So again, I even though I'd had this beautiful experience with this deity, with this archetype, I didn't really understand the importance of it until 2007, when I began to have some other archetypal experiences. And I had gone to South America and had an experience in one of the medicine churches there related to the Santo Daime Church, where I drank ayahuasca in a church setting. It's legal down there. And I began to have visions. And on the first night, I had a vision of Lord Krishna again. And it was Krishna in what's called Krishna in the universal form. And it was like this golden, luminous, I would say being, but it was not embodied, but it was like it was physically there. And in the Jewish tradition, because this is what my background was, just out of nowhere, I began to have dialogue with Lord Krishna. And I would ask questions like, these weren't even questions that I thought to ask, but it would be like, why do my wife and I fight all the time? And Lord Krishna it would say, look, how could it be any other way? It was like these deeper understandings, or, why are we polluting the earth? Look, how could this be any other way? That karma and just the universe, the creation is just so complex, we will never ever completely understand it. And even the greatest of great traditions, Tibetan Buddhism, or all of these traditions, Hinduism, the Western traditions as well, in their greatness, in their most powerful, they can only point to that truth that we will never completely understand, because it was prior to all of us, right? It was prior to this consciousness that's only been around a couple 100,000 years at the most, right? So I had this opening to Lord Krishna, and again, I would go in and out of these visions, but they started to become more frequent. And in 2009, a couple years later, I went to India, and when I was in India this time, I was having these things around the Divine Mother. Like I was visiting a temple there, and there were a whole bunch of women singing out there, and in Sanskrit, and they didn't speak any English, but they wanted me to come over and sit with them, and I found that they were singing songs to the Mother outside of the temple. And I had an experience where a sadhu came up to me in this same temple, and I had a bracelet at that time. I didn't really wear much jewelry, but I had a bracelet, and this sadhu walked up to me, and he touched my bracelet, and he said, yantra, yantra, and he showed me this yantra. And what a yantra is in Hinduism, it's a drawing or a sculpture that, is an archetype. It's a portal to something transcendent. Okay. And it's like, you can meditate on like a geometric form or things like that. But this was a portal to the transcendent. And so I thanked him, and then he gave me this yantra. And I gave him some money, because in India, you don't know, you kind of give everybody a little bit of money, and you don't know if he's a saint or if he's just somebody who's trying to sell you his yantra. But this was one that I thought that he wore for a long time, so I took it from him. And I was in Delhi, and I happened to be staying in a very nice hotel in Delhi for one night, because I couldn't find an inexpensive hotel like I usually got there. I stayed at the Claridge's Hotel. And when I walked into the Claridge's Hotel, there was a store. I went in there like very, very late at night, that was closed, that had silk jackets in it. And I walked by the store, and I thought, I would never buy one of those jackets, but they were very beautiful. And I went that night and stayed there overnight. And the next morning I got up, and when I left the hotel, I saw the store again, and I thought, I would never get a jacket like this, but I'm going to just take the phone number, because there's something about the store that's interesting me. And I went along on this trip, while I was in India, this same trip. And also, while I was on the trip, then I began to think about these jackets, and for some reason, it was drawing me. And I thought, should I buy a jacket? I would never wear anything that kind of wild and ostentatious or whatever. So just a couple days before I was coming back, I thought, you know what? I'm going to buy this jacket. I don't know why I'm drawn to it. I don't know if I'll ever wear it, but I'm going to buy one. So I contacted the store that was making the jackets and asked the man if he could make one. And he was very excited, and he said, of course we can make one for you in 2 days, because in India, it's hard to get a good sale, especially if something that's a couple $100. And so they did whatever they can to try and make me have my jacket within 24 or 48 hours. So I went to Delhi, they made the jacket, and I then hopped on the plane and came back to the I actually hopped on a plane and went to South America, where I was going to go on a retreat for 5 weeks. So within a couple of days of being at this retreat, I was just doing meditation, and I was sitting deep in meditation one day, and this blueness came into my consciousness. And I was still in this idea about the non-dual being the quote unquote real truth. And when this blueness came in, my mind said, oh, that's just Lord Krishna. You should let that archetype go, because, it's something that's, not present in dreamless sleep. Let it go. And this voice then came to me and it said, no, this is not Lord Krishna. This is the shield of David. And you carry the shield of David, and your father carried the shield of David, and your grandfather carried the shield of David. But you know how to use this. And my mind is going like, the shield of David, what's the shield of David? And I didn't really know what it was. But what also came to me was that the shield of David in this vision is the compassion of King David, and that this compassion is a qualityless compassion. It's not a compassion where I'm feeling compassion for you or you're feeling compassion for me. It's the essence of compassion, and that is present in me and is present in all of us, whether we even recognize it or not. That is part of the higher power that we will never completely understand. And so I went that night and looked up about the shield of David. And of course, the shield of David was the Star of David. And I realized what I had was the archetypal experience of the return of the prodigal son to the father, which is famous in paintings like by Rembrandt and people like that, where I had gone away from my religion for 40 years. And here, after all of this exploration of Hinduism and Buddhism and all these different things, I was back to this experience of Judaism, which I had really never thought I would return to and never realized the richness or the power of it there. And so 3 days later, I was in a song circle, and we were singing our hearts out in all kinds of spiritual songs. And I had asked someone there if I could get a star, because this star was, they have a six-pointed star that comes out of the Santo Daime tradition, which is the same star that's the Jewish star, right? And it's also the same star that's the Anahata chakra in Hinduism. You know, the heart chakra is a six-pointed star. And so in this song circle, which had a Santo Daime feel, but it really was not a church on its own and didn't claim itself to be a church, even though it was organized as a religious society. I asked if I could have a star that night, and it didn't mean I was joining a church or anything, but it just was like, okay, I'm dedicating myself to this form of prayer because it was just so beautiful. And you know, people in that group could belong to 5 different churches or 5 different faiths or whatever, but I just felt like I wanted to make a commitment to what I was doing there because it was so beautiful and singing. And they said, well, you know, we're giving out a number of stars tonight. I don't know if we're going to have time to give a star to you or not. And so, you know, you can go back and sit. And so we were singing all these different songs. And I was singing and just feeling this great opening and joy in my heart, like a little kid who's totally free, when someone came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder from behind. And I immediately turned around and thought I had done something wrong. Like when you're the little kid who's feeling all of his joy and mom comes up to you and says, don't do that. And I turned around and I said, did I do something wrong? And this man who was there said, no, you didn't do anything wrong. We're singing for you. We're bringing you up to get your star. We're going to celebrate you. And so he took me out of my seat, and I went up to the front of the room where 100 people were singing to me. And I looked on the wall, and there was this painting of a woman in red with a crown on her head, riding like a peacock or something like that. And I just said, and something through my mind just said, that's the Virgin Mary, even though it looked nothing like the Virgin Mary. This just like came to me. And everybody sang, and I was so emotional. And then the song was ending, and they brought me back down to my seat. And I said, and when I sat in my seat, this vision of the Virgin Mary appeared to me in this gold luminescence with jewels, with rubies and sapphires and emeralds. And I just realized that even if my own mother wasn't perfect, the one who would say, you shouldn't be doing that, the Divine Mother loves every cell, every atom, every molecule, every particle of us, and that we at our hearts are free. And in that moment of this freedom, out of nowhere, I spoke to God and just said, Divine Mother, make me the husband you always wanted. I don't know where this came from. And in that moment she did, and all of the channels opened, and I felt this marriage to her. And I realized that that was why I had bought the jacket. And from that day forward, I've dressed for her, and I'm here to serve her. So since then, I also, the piece of jewelry that was given to me, I have these pieces of jewelry that I never wore jewelry. I happen to have that one bracelet on, but I was not someone who wore jewelry. Since then, I dressed for her, and the jewelry is from her. And also that night, she gave me a song on that first night, which was the song that I played for you. I am marrying Maria. I am marrying Maria. Complete me, complete me, complete me. I love Maria. I love Maria.